Board on this Sunday afternoon here in Germany and Sunday evening in India. I'm really pleased to have on a guest from India today, which is Saarthak. Saarthak, how are you doing?
Fantastic. Great to be on this live with you, John. Fantastic.
Great. Tell us a bit about you anyway. Tell us a bit about, you played a bit of tennis as well, right?
Right. Well, I was playing the ITA, which is like the national circuit in India, and I used to play the under 18s and the men's tournaments about 10 years back. And I mean, I didn't really go further down the line. I wanted to pursue it, but things didn't work out. So then the everything got channelized into commentating, anchoring, and the love for tennis is now expressed through my voice.
Yeah, great, and it's great to have you on board today. Tell us a bit about your recent experience regarding some commentary, or I should say, hosting of Roland Garros in India, right?
Right. So, I was looking forward to this big break on television for tennis, and earlier this year I was close to getting it with the Australian Open because
Okay.
I was called in to host the Australian Open, but at that point in January we had COVID spreading rapidly in Mumbai, where I stay,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
just 2 days before I was to go on air, I was tested positive for COVID. So that
Oh.
didn't work out. Yeah, and fortunately, I got the French Open, and then that was just a dream come true. 15 days speaking tennis every day on air, on during prime time on national television. I couldn't have asked for anything better and bigger. So yeah,
Saarthak, that sounds wonderful. What were your thoughts on the Roland Garros tournament this year?
I personally felt I think what Rafa does is we say he's superhuman. He's a demigod. He's not normal, but he feels the pain. We should credit him for being human and still being able to do what he does. He's so good at this ability to rise above pain and just he produces miracles at every slam. That's
Yeah.
we thought he produced a miracle at Melbourne when he won after being 2 sets down against Medvedev in that final, and then you just think, okay, that's it, he's not going to do it again. He's aging, and he's but he comes back and he surprises us each time, and I just feel this French Open will obviously be remembered for the 14th. And oh, of course, we should speak so much more about what Iga Swiatek did, because that streak was phenomenal. What she did, I think she got to 35 with that
Yeah.
final win, and that is. We realize it more now after she's losing. She lost at Wimbledon, then she lost at Poland. So
Yeah.
she is human too, and I think that she herself said it during the French Open that I know this streak is going to end at some point, but I think it'll be remembered for those two things in particular, what Rafa did and what Swiatek did with her streak.
Great. So you said you played a bit of tennis as well, and you also sort of occasionally maybe sort of raise the profile, if you like, of Indian tennis. I also would like to know this Rafa and Djokovic rivalry. Obviously, we've had Federer in the past as well involved. In India, do you get a sense of which player is more popular?
I think the sense that you mentioned across the world, the Rafa and the Roger fans dominate. I don't think the Novak fan club is as prominent, even in India, as much as a Roger Federer fan club or a Rafael Nadal fan club.
Hmm.
I think that's how it is. I do not understand why they don't have as many Novak Djokovic fans in India, but it's how it is, and probably it'll change. It'll change in maybe a year or two when Novak ends up surpassing Rafa, because that's how I see it. And
Okay.
I know that you are a huge Rafa fan. Am I right?
Yes, I am. Yeah, and I don't hide it. It's okay. Everyone knows. I think I agree with you. I still see Djokovic as being the favorite in this race, but I thought the race was pretty much done this time last year when he gets to
Hmm.
20, Djokovic. So I'm as shocked as anybody to be here a year later, and Rafa is now leading it again.
Right. I mean, when I think at the start of the year, we all were discussing if Djokovic will be playing for his 21st, for a shot at the 21st at the Australian Open. And I mean, he was the outright favorite because he's won 9 times going into that at the Australian Open. He was someone who should have got the 10th one comfortably. And I think the whole conversation would have been a lot different in 2022 had Djokovic at the start won the 21st. But I mean, obviously, momentum plays a big role. With that win for Rafa, he came in and took it to 22, and all of a sudden, he clearly became the GOAT. Because if you just see purely in terms of the Grand Slam titles,
Hmm.
but there are so many factors. A lot of Roger Federer fans still feel he's the GOAT, even though he's at 20. And I mean, in terms of popularity for me and for a lot of fans that I speak with in India, they still feel Roger Federer is the GOAT and he is the most popular.
And Indian tennis, for me, there aren't too many prominent players, particularly on the men's side. I remember Nadal playing at the US Open, funny enough, 3 years ago. Did he play Federer maybe in the first round?
Yeah, he took a set off Federer. You're right.
Yeah,
Yes.
not bad. And so he's somebody who came across my path. There's a couple on the women's side as well that have done reasonably well. Tell us about the state of Indian tennis right now.
So, John, we are at a very emotional point, particularly going into the U.S. Open, because our legend Sonia Mirza plays her last ever slam, and
Oh,
she's won 6 Grand Slam titles for us. She's been the only Indian female athlete to compete at 4 Olympic Games,
okay.
and this is her 21st year on the circuit. So she's pretty much carried Indian women tennis on her shoulders for a very long time, and she's retiring. So I mean, it's we do not really know who's going to fill that void because it's going to be a major void after she retires at the US Open. She's announced at the start that this year is her last year on the circuit. So, I mean, other than that, we don't have really big names, but like you mentioned, Sumit Nagal on the men's side, he's somebody we are very hopeful will bring us. He has the potential to go into a Grand Slam main draw and trouble some of the big players and make that run because you saw that with Federer, he took a set off him, but obviously there's a lot more work. I mean, it will take. He's being mentored by the right people. Sumit Nagal. He has Somdev Devvarman, who's been a former top 100 singles player for India in the ATP in the world rankings. So
Hmm.
he is being mentored by Somdev Devvarman. He's being backed by a cricket legend, Virat Kohli. So Sumit Nagal has the right people around him. If things go well, he should be our future. But on the women's side, we have. I mean, I think it's going to take a while to replace or to find someone who can be as good as Sania Mirza for us.
Yeah. Talking of cricket, I know it's another passion of yours and millions of
Yeah.
others across India and many other parts of the world too. And Sachin Tendulkar is somebody who tweets quite frequently anyway regarding Nadal's greatness. And he's very keen to really celebrate some of Nadal's achievements, especially this year. I didn't know he was a tennis fan until I started seeing these tweets.
He is. He is. In fact, you'll see him at Wimbledon quite often. He's even been there to watch Federer play live. And Sachin is. He himself plays tennis, so he plays a lot of
Okay.
golf. He plays a lot of tennis. So yeah, I mean, we have a lot of cricketers who do support. I think there's Yuvraj Singh, who's also a legend in Indian cricket, who plays tennis, who supports tennis. So yeah, tennis has a lot of support here.
So I'd like to bring us to the present. We spoke quite a bit about the past. We spoke quite a bit about support as well, and we spoke a bit about Indian tennis. But I'd actually like us now to get to really what I want to speak about most today, which is the upcoming Cincinnati Open or the Cincinnati Masters 1000. There's a lot to look forward to, and probably none more than the return of Senor Nadal. How do you think he's going to get on there?
I feel all eyes will be on Rafa because after that Wimbledon, the abdominal injury, he withdrew from the semi-final, and the fact that he could win in 5 sets against Taylor Fritz with that pain, that in itself speaks volumes about what this legend is made of. And all eyes, I think this Cincy tournament will be particularly watched by everyone to understand how good Rafa is feeling going into the US Open. I mean,
Yeah.
I think this is going to decide, pretty much give us all an idea, all tennis fans an idea of what Rafa can do at the US Open, because if he's not feeling good, I don't think he's going to go to the US Open. But if he's come to Cincy, that in itself is a major positive. He wouldn't have taken that flight. I mean, we saw the picture he put on social media. I'm flying to Cincy tomorrow, and
Yeah.
he looks pretty fine in the practice sessions. And John, you'll be able to share. Or, I mean, what do you think, and how is Rafa feeling as per your understanding going into
I'm
Cincy?
I'm pleased you asked, and I'm pleased you also mentioned the Taylor Fritz thing, where basically he's pretty much injured and without a serve, and yet managed to prevail. I was both at that match, and I think every match of his throughout Wimbledon, and I attended most of his press conferences. I didn't get to go to the press conference where he announced he was pulling out, but I was at the press conference 24 hours earlier. And he did seem quite glum, considering he'd just beaten Fritz. And we obviously remember the images of his father telling him to retire. And then the next day, on the Thursday, I was actually in a bar watching the women's semis. And then they went to a clip of him practicing his serves. So this is Thursday afternoon, about 3 hours before he eventually announced he was pulling out. And I could see him trying serves, and it was like, wow, this is even worse than yesterday, if you like, when he was obviously playing Fritz, and his serves were dropping to sort of 70, 80 miles an hour, which is, not even a good second serve, really. Now, he then has basically a week off. I think it's pretty clear that he's going to be back on a court soon after Wimbledon, but not serving. And then he does about a week or two without serving at all, but we could see how he was against Fritz. The rest of his game was on fire, especially the forehand. So what I remember against Fritz, and I just showed, funny enough, a few minutes ago, I showed him practicing some overhead. That's in Cincinnati. And I wanted to show that particular clip because it was actually an overhead that he did against Fritz that I think exaggerated or made the problem worse. He already was wearing the taping throughout the tournament at Wimbledon, but he did an overhead, I think, at 3-1. He's got an early break, and he's playing some sensational tennis in that early stages of that match. And it's from that moment, I would say, that he never quite was the same. And it's interesting to see him practicing his overheads there, because it's the overhead and obviously the serve where the abdominals get stretched the most, and they need to be at their strongest. And I was also following his serving practice over the last couple of weeks. And I tweeted about 2 weeks ago, people were getting very excited about his return in Canada. And I said, hold your horses here, because I'm watching him practice these serves. And it's exactly like it was that Thursday at Wimbledon. These are not first serves or even second serves. These are just getting the ball over the net. And he still didn't look comfortable. So I wasn't surprised when a few days later he said, sorry, I'm not going to make Canada. But then I thought, okay, another week, he makes Cincinnati. And as you say, I pretty much agree with you. I think we'll have a much better idea about his US Open chances this time next week. He's got an okay draw until probably the quarterfinals, where he's probably going to play Felix if he gets that far. That's my assessment. And I think Felix has had a pretty good year, Wimbledon aside. He did quite well as well in his home tournament in Montreal. I think he got to the quarterfinals or the semifinals there. So we've obviously got those finals coming up today, which I think will also impact Cincinnati, especially as they could be back on a court in 24 or 48 hours. So Nadal is due to take the court on Wednesday, so I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, so anything you think, what I've just said, you think, Saarthak, you disagree with or have some thoughts on?
You mentioned Felix towards the end, John. I want to touch upon Felix with you because he had a phenomenal run up to the quarters at Montreal. He was on his way to possibly lifting that title. A lot of people felt he has the chance with being the local favorite, and the crowd was the energy. We saw those pictures that Felix himself tweeted out, and it was looking like this was his tournament to win. And what really went wrong, because that was, I mean, Casper Ruud just destroyed him, if I may say so. I mean, straight sets. What do you think? Because I was rooting for Felix in particular in that quarters. I thought he has made his time has come. But John, what do you understand? Why didn't things work out?
I don't know if it was the pressure of the home crowd. I have to say that may what I found interesting, to be honest with you, is the reaction afterwards. In fact, he took to Twitter today to tweet in both French and English. I'm actually going to get that up on the screen for us because listen. First of all, I think he's had a great year. But secondly, this defeat did seem to hurt. I mean, he expresses his thanks there, and kind of apologizes for not progressing. So whether he was feeling an extra pressure playing in Montreal, but I actually do like his chances in Cincinnati. And I tell you what, I'm actually going to come up front now and say, I think he might well win Cincinnati. I think that's a tough draw for, yeah, I know. I'm saying it here. I'm putting it out there. I tweeted this morning that I've predicted Coco Gauff on the women's side and Felix on the men's. And the first
in fact, you say Coco, I've predicted Coco to go lift the US Open. So I've gone a step further.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's big. That's big. And I've
gone with either Coco or Swiatek. The Swiatek part is the safe part, but I'm going big on Coco Gauff this time. Yeah.
And but actually, go on. Regarding, going big on taking a risk, if you like, that's exactly the first comment I got from Quality Shot on tennis. He said brave regarding my predictions of Felix and Coco. But I think you're probably right. Probably Felix is an even bigger I just saw him playing that phenomenal tennis in the early part of Montreal. I've also seen with Felix this year, he's got the monkey off the back, having lost finals quite a lot at 500 level, and I think he may have made a Masters 1000. I'm not sure, but you're right. He's never won a Masters 1000, so that would be big. And I think US Open he did pretty well at last year. I think he got to the semi-finals where he lost to eventual champion Medvedev. And in fact, he's getting really far in these tournaments. He lost to Medvedev again in Australia with match points. He did as well as anyone did against Rafa at the French Open, pushing him to 5 sets in that phenomenal match.
Absolutely. Yes.
I'm guessing you were working that day as you worked every day. What were your thoughts on that Felix and Rafa match?
I think that's where Felix really announced to the world, I'm ready for the big stage. That's what I felt, because this is Rafa on clay. You push Rafa on clay, that in itself speaks volumes. And John, we speak so much about Carlos Alcaraz. The tennis world went crazy before the French Open. We all thought he's the next big thing, and he is fantastic. But when you speak of the next gen, we were not speaking so much before the French Open and before the Wimbledon about Yannick Sinner. And out of nowhere, Yannick Sinner has risen and he is looking so good. Similarly, now the pressure, like you spoke of pressure. Now, what happened? You saw the tweet from Alcaraz just a day or two back where he said, I felt the pressure,
Yeah, he was always playing. He was a breakup in that second set, wasn't he?
Exactly. And he was always playing as the underdog, as someone who was not being watched as closely. And that pressure was never there. Now he's playing as this guy who's expected to lift titles. And that's getting to him. So I think that's also, like you mentioned, that's probably what got to Felix, because now he was expected to go and lift Montreal because this is his home crowd, this is his home tournament. So I think if these guys, the Sinners, the Alcarazes, the Felix, the next gen, they just go for it. They play with freedom. Yeah. I think they're unstoppable. I think they can do anything on the tour.
And Alcaraz and Felix both having really aggressive games. So you probably are going to get shown up if pressure is getting to you. And I think that was an interesting tweet from Alcaraz. It also was something echoed by Maria Sakkari as well in a press conference recently where, this year in particular, she's going into tournaments and going into matches as a heavy favorite. And she said that kind of weighed on her quite heavily, but she also promised to show a different side of herself because I think she's had a pretty disappointing year in many respects, especially summer time. And she went out kind of a bit disappointingly to Mukova at the French Open, where many people would have thought she could at least repeat last year's semi-final feat. She got to the semi-final of the US Open last year, so she's going to be defending a lot of points. But coming back to Alcaraz and Felix and the pressure, I thought that was an interesting tweet from Alcaraz saying, that, I felt the pressure and I'm feeling the pressure as being the favorite because I think pretty much from the French Open onwards, and now I mean French Open this year for the rest of his career, he's going to go into almost every match as a favorite. Obviously playing Djokovic or Nadal will be different, but so, and of course, what happened to him at the French Open, he goes in and get that match against Zverev. I thought he would win. Many people thought he would win. and he didn't quite deliver. And it wasn't until he was 2 sets down when he started to
Yeah.
perform. So perhaps
Yeah.
both Felix and Carlos are feeling a little bit in terms of that. But like I say, Felix has got even more pressure on him now because I've just predicted him to win Cincinnati. So let's see how he handles that.
Exactly. And if you speak of the seedings at Cincinnati, Carlos Alcaraz is the third seed, Rafa is the second seed. So now
Yep.
imagine you're just a seed behind the guy you grew up idolizing. That in itself is something that Carlos Alcaraz is trying to absorb, and he's going to accept it that now he is up there. He's the third seed, and
Yep.
he has to live with it because he it's not been it's been such a short while. If you just try to understand, this guy was the underdog, and now he's right behind Rafa. And as much as Rafa is expected to perform, and Alcaraz is expected to perform at Cincinnati. And again, just going purely by the seedings, how much of if you see Medvedev's the top seed, Tsitsipas
Yep.
is fourth, fifth is Rublev, Felix at 7, and Hurkacz. And I want you to tell me, John, what do you make of Hubie Hurkacz's form of late? He's playing some good tennis, isn't he?
I think he's somebody who really exemplifies this situation with many tennis players where they seem to perform at certain times of the year, but I think even more specifically in certain parts of the world. And he seems to love North America. I think he may even have spent time living there. I think he still lives in Florida. That's his residence. And I think his only Masters 1000 to date was it Indian Wells or Miami? Maybe Miami, about 18 months ago. I think it was when it was rescheduled in the October or something. I think he certainly got a Masters 1000. And it was in Miami. And that was the same year that Medvedev could barely walk because I think he was cramping up so much. And Medvedev as well is somebody who also tends to perform well at this time of the year. But Medvedev has had a really strange year. He's been getting the number ones. He's been getting the number one spot on the back of a defeat kind of thing. And obviously we had the no points at Wimbledon, and we've just seen the statistic regarding his number of points now to be number one is the lowest since 2009. And I think there's a bit of pressure on Medvedev because this is when he's expected to perform. And I've got my doubts about him. And I'm sure he has his doubts. There's a lot of people for the first time, I think, with Medvedev, because his rise has been fairly constantly upward, his trajectory. And I think for the first time, we've seen a sort of a dip from him, if you like, certainly a sustained dip anyway. He's had dips before. I remember at the ATP finals in 2019 after that North American swing where he did so well. But then he had a dip after that. But then he was back at an Australian Open final not long afterwards and so on and so forth. And he got to the US Open semifinals in 2020, and then obviously going on to the final in 2021, and then winning it in 2021. But I think there's pressure on Medvedev right now. And I'm looking at the draw as I look now, as I talk, and I do see the top half being a bit lighter, a bit weaker, perhaps, than the bottom half. So again, somebody like Kyrgios, who's in excellent form, must be looking at this draw thinking, I could be playing Medvedev again, and I've just beaten him quite convincingly in that third set. Rublev's form is really hit and miss, and maybe more miss than hit. Tsitsipas has fallen off the edge of a cliff since the French Open in 2021. So that top half of the draw, to me, seems a bit lighter. When we look at Hurkacz, who you just highlighted, I fancy his chances. He's potentially going to have Isner in the second round. That will be a tricky one for him. And I also think Hurkacz, of course, is in the final in Canada. Now, that... As I said to you at the beginning of the program, that can impact as well. And I don't see him pulling out of Cincinnati because it's such a big tournament. And it's also obviously still there's enough of a gap between Cincinnati and the US Open to recharge the batteries. But it may well impact him in terms of going far. And if anyone's going to highlight that may be Isner. But I don't think there'll be any need to worry. If he's in the final in Canada, if he just suddenly went out in Cincinnati in the second round, and I'm not saying he will, but if he does, I still don't think it's no need to press the panic button. Casper Ruud is doing well on the hard courts and has really all year. He got to the final, I think, where he lost to Alcaraz in Miami. He then had a very sort of substandard, I would say, clay court swing until the French Open where he got to the final. But he'll also be looking at this bottom half of the draw thinking, I could well be playing Alcaraz again. They're both in the same quarter. But I think I see, and Sinner is someone we haven't really touched on. He's had a pretty good last few weeks as well.
We'll come to Sinner, but before that, I want to talk to you about Medvedev and Kyrgios, John.
Sure.
Particularly with Medvedev winning at Mexico, I thought this guy has won the title at the perfect time because that was his first ATP title of 2022, and he's peaking at the right time. And then you have this mega clash between him and Kyrgios, and Medvedev loses to Kyrgios, and all of a sudden, I'm just thinking to myself, how good has Kyrgios become? Because Kyrgios is he won at Washington the singles and the doubles. So between Kyrgios and Medvedev, John, what do you? I mean, who's looking more dangerous going into Cincy, going into the U.S. Open for you?
Okay, good question. And I like the question because I have an answer. Sometimes we don't have an answer, but I have one. And I'm pretty clear on this. Cincinnati, I would look at slightly differently to the US because 5 sets, 3 sets, pressure, going through 7 rounds at a major is a very different situation to a Masters 1000. So if you said to me, who do I see winning this match if they do play each other again? I probably, because of recency bias, would err towards Kyrgios. He's had also a fantastic year as well, where he's pretty much won every match you expect him to win, and his losses have been understandable, if you like. He lost to Rafa in 3 tight sets at Indian Wells, for example. He lost to eventual finalist and now world number 1 Medvedev in Australia, and so on and so forth.
Right.
And again, at Wimbledon, he was until the final, he was peerless, and that will have helped him. I still have doubts though about Kyrgios at a major, if you like. And so therefore, Cincinnati, he may well beat Medvedev again and may well even go on to win the title or certainly go far and get to the final. But if you then
Mm,
said to me, John, who do you think is more likely to win the US Open, Daniel Medvedev or Kyrgios, I would then flip and say Medvedev. Because we know Medvedev has been there, seen it, worn the T-shirt, done it. He's
mm,
been in 3, I think, major finals now.
right.
And, 2 of those 3 he performed in, let's say. I mean, he probably didn't quite bring his best to the Australian Open final in 2021, but his 2 US Open final, one of which I was at in 2019, very fortunately. That was an epic match against Nadal, where he pushed Nadal to places that very few players can push him. So, yeah, I think if we go into the US Open, who do I fancy more? Medvedev, because he's got the pedigree, if you like. And I'm still not sure about Kyrgios. I mean, we see his tiebreak record. I think it's very sketchy. I know, we had those love 40 moments and 40 love moments where he lost his serve or couldn't break Djokovic. And I know we're talking about one of, if not the greatest player of all time, but he did have chances in the opening 2 sets. I mean, he won one of them. But even in the tiebreak in the 4th set, I think he did break down. He went for a wild shot at one point. I think he was
Yeah.
already 3 or 4-1 down in the tiebreak. He went for a wild shot that was never going to happen. But he grew frustrated because he knew that the long game against Djokovic, he's not going to beat him. He needed to come up with winners, but that was a bit too ambitious. So I just see Medvedev as being able to handle that situation a bit better, particularly over 2 weeks and 7 matches. So
Mm.
yeah, what about you? What do you think?
I think you've answered this so well. Medvedev, for me, also like you said, the 5 sets, the 3 sets. I mean, the pressure of playing through 2 weeks at the big stage, and we've seen that over the years with the big three. They are different at the slams. We don't
Yeah.
see the same big three that we see at the Masters tournaments in the slams. There's a they bring out the A game on another level at slams, and I think that's what you mentioned perfectly. I mean, we can expect Kyrgios to go win Cincinnati, but you can't say that he'll come with that same kind of intensity or the. I don't. I would agree with you. I still feel Medvedev has a better shot at going and lifting, going into the final at the U.S. Open than Kyrgios. But again, what I'm trying to understand is why do you feel John is Kyrgios not taking some rest here? I mean, he's won Washington. He's looking tired, especially. I mean, when I saw him at Montreal, either that's how he is. I mean, he portrays that image that he wants to. I mean, you can never tell what Kyrgios is exactly feeling because there's so many layers and sides to what Kyrgios exhibits on a tennis court, and you're always trying to think, okay, what's next? He's always surprised you, but I think he's played a lot of tennis in 2022, and he's just peaking a lot before the U.S. Open. Shouldn't he be resting at this point?
Well, peaking at the wrong time is exactly what the non-big 3 so often do. We do see them winning over 3 sets. We see them peaking at the ATP Tour Finals, for example, and we're thinking, Why couldn't you have done that, 6 weeks before at the US Open or whatever? But we see the big three always judging it right, always peaking it correctly. And they are being very selective with the tournaments that they do and do not play now. I don't ever expect to see Rafa Nadal play Miami again. I see whatever happens in the rest of his career, I see him wanting to take a break before the clays court swing. I think if it wasn't for the fact that there are two big tournaments in Spain during that clay court season, I think he probably wouldn't play so much clay court tennis. But coming back to Kyrgios and focusing on him in particular in terms of tightness, I know what you mean. I actually only saw the first set against Hurkacz, where, of course, he lost in a tiebreaker. But I think he's also probably thinking, I've got plenty of other times to rest. And I actually spoke to him earlier this year at Wimbledon, and I asked him about what's potentially held him back previously. He gave a fairly flippant response, as only Nick Kyrgios can, and he said, it's because I'm coming from Australia and I can't travel or go to all these tournaments as much as anyone else. Blah, blah. I think he was a bit tongue-in-cheek when he said that. But he's also probably thinking the US Open could be my last tournament of the year, and I'm going to rest up. I don't know if he plans to play. I don't know where he's in the race as well. He must be pretty high in the race, and he has a chance of making that. And that, of course, would change things. But if he doesn't make that, he might well just skip the indoor European season that's coming up after the US Open. So perhaps he's thinking, I'll just give it the one last big one here at Cincinnati, and then again. I mean, he obviously going out in the semifinals in Cincinnati, that gives him in Montreal, that gives him a couple of extra days rest compared to somebody like Hurkacz. So let's see. But if he went out early again, I don't think he need to panic. He's had a great year. As I said, he's won all the matches he should win, and sometimes in incredible style. So that may be the case there. Thanks very much, Jamie and Ajmal, as well, for your compliments. And I know that I appreciate it, and I'm sure that Saarthak does too. So I'm going to push you now, Saarthak. Who's winning Cincinnati, men?
I personally, I'm just loving the form Yannick Sinner is in, and I have picked him as one of my top 3 contenders to go lift the US Open. That's where I see Yannick Sinner's potential, because he's playing fearless tennis, and he has the game. He has that. I see a lot of Djokovic and Federer-esque combos in his game. In terms of the ability to hit that forehand on the run, the way he hits those winners. Yannick Sinner's got that reach. He's got the lateral movement. The athleticism resembles Djokovic, and the game, the grace resembles Federer for me. So I think he can be the future, and he is also the present. I mean, he has the potential to go be a top player, and I would say he's my hot favorite at Cincy. But again, when you see Nadal returning, and if Nadal plays without the pain, there's no stopping Nadal at any tournament. You never write off a Rafael Nadal. When everyone feels that this is it, that guy does something that stuns the world, and that's how he has always been. And if Rafa, we'll get a clearer idea on Wednesday. I mean, of how he's feeling. But I think in my mind, if Rafa is playing without the pain, I go with Rafa if he's playing without the pain. Other than that, I'm still going heavy on Yannick Sinner. And I also want to understand from you. I mean, when you again, I come back to the same thing. Yannick Sinner won at Croatia. He won the Croatia Open and beat Alcaraz. The second and the third sets were 6-1, 6-1, John. And again, when you're playing so good, what is the need for Yannick Sinner to also play all of these tournaments leading up to the US Open? What do you make of that?
I think, listen, 3 sets different to 5. Age obviously comes into it as well. And I think, he won that tournament, as you said, against Alcaraz, demolishing him in those 2 sets, or the final. Because I think they went to 3 sets, that match, right? I think he lost the first one, the second 2. I don't worry about him playing too much tennis at this stage of the year. I think the biggest problem is the off season can often be too short. So they're playing tennis into the end of November, and they're back on a court end of December, as they arrive in Melbourne for the Aussie Open. I think there are. I actually think there's too many. Personally, this is about the calendar now, and I think there are probably too many tournaments in general. I certainly think we could probably lose 1 or 2 Masters 1000s. possibly adding one on grass, but the grass court season is so short. I would even like to see Wimbledon, if it could go back another week. It used to be pretty much coming a week after the French Open. I think it now starts 2 weeks after the French Open. If it's possible, given the weather, and I know the grass is a bit different, I would love to see that go back a week and then possibly every tournament subsequently. But I don't really understand this clay court weird season that we returned to between Wimbledon and so I know that there's financial aspects going on, but if you want to have a good quality of tennis, but in terms of Sinner's freshness, he's had a good year. I think I don't have too many concerns about that. I think that win against Alcaraz that you highlight is a landmark win. Funny enough. Well, that and of course the one at Wimbledon were landmark victories for him. So he's just beaten Alcaraz quite comfortably in a way. Certainly at Wimbledon in 4 sets, I think it was. And I think those 2 wins are really big against the
not only the win against Alcaraz at Wimbledon, he followed it up with winning 2 sets against Djokovic in the quarterfinals at Wimbledon.
Right.
That was something. I mean, at that point, everyone knew, like, that is where the tennis world started speaking about Yannick Sinner as much as they were speaking about Carlos Alcaraz. Because till that point, it was like we were all anticipating a Djokovic versus Alcaraz quarterfinal at Wimbledon. It was predicted even before, right when the draws came out. And I always felt that it's Yannick Sinner who's going to feel it, because this is a 20-year-old, and all of a sudden he's not being spoken of as much as he was being when he came in as an 18-year-old. It was all eyes were on Yannick Sinner, and now he would be hungrier to sort of prove himself, which is what he's doing. And I think this hunger is what should take him deeper into Cincinnati and also at the US Open. And I mean, let's see how that goes. But again, you're from the UK, John. I want to speak of the blockbuster match, Emma Raducanu, and she plays Serena Williams in round 1. I mean, how are you feeling?
Perfect. I'm very excited. Let's switch over to the women's now. We've done the men's and we've given up predictions. Right. So yeah, definitely. That is a blockbuster match. I'm actually a bit saddened. I'd like to see it maybe as a second or a third round match. I'd like to see them have a fairly easy first round, perhaps, where they can both progress and then meet. Because at the end of the day, I think they're both, obviously for the very different reasons, crowd pullers, and that would be great to see them go a bit further in the tournament. But we're going to lose one on day one. But I'm also very excited. Serena's on what seems to be her farewell tour, in the final set of her career, if you like, using a tennis analogy there.
Yes.
I would probably think Emma is the favorite, just because of what Emma's done over the last 12, 18 months. I mean, there's a lot of question marks, some of which I think have been a bit unfair on Raducanu over her form since winning the US Open. And there's also question marks regarding her coaching situation. Serena, of course, has 23 Grand Slams under her belt. So, she has it, but we've not, at least Serena won a match last week. And, both of these two players, I think, could make the second week at the US Open. They could also go out in the first round at the US Open. They also both could go quite far in this tournament. I don't think, if you said to me, okay, here we go, and this is why I'm probably going for Raducanu. If you said to me, which is more likely, Raducanu wins Cincinnati or Serena Williams wins Cincinnati? Serena Williams wins Cincinnati. I'm going, I can see Raducanu possibly winning it. It would be a big surprise, but but I'm not predicting it. I'm just saying that if you said to me in a week from now, Raducanu is about to play the final in Cincinnati, I'd be go, oh, that's a turn up. That's a really good thing for her to have before the US Open. If you said to me Serena Williams is about to contest that final in a week's time, I would fall off my chair. So that's probably why I'm just erring towards Raducanu, but I'm really excited. I hope it goes to 3 sets. What about you? What do you think?
I like how I think somewhere, because of the recency, the last 12 months or so, the form that Emma has been in, I think she might have that slight edge. But when you speak about the game styles, Serena just lost to Belinda Bencic, so that was something that when you see how Bencic overpowered Serena, Bencic was just going after it. The firepower in her ground strokes, that is what Serena. That is what Emma might not be able to do, is what I see as a bigger concern for Emma Raducanu going into this one. Because if Serena starts playing like the Serena we've seen through those 23 Grand Slam wins, I think she can win this in straight sets too. And I don't know. Again, this is Ohio. Again, the crowd will be after Serena.
Of course.
Everything will factor in, and I don't know. Maybe if I had to give an edge now, when I think of it, I'll still pick Serena to win this one.
Fair
And
enough.
let's see.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
I, I think that would be huge for Serena. I really do. I think that would, whatever, if she beats Raducanu, number 10 in the world, US Open champion, who, okay, Raducanu, as I say, has had an on and off sort of 12 months since the US Open, but beating Raducanu is a feather in your cap, whoever you are, whether you've won 23 Grand Slams or zero. I think that's a good feather in your cap. In fact, if she was to beat Raducanu, that would instill some belief, and it would also instill some belief in me, in that I would then be thinking, yeah, second week is possible. Because, okay, she lost first round at Wimbledon, but that was a tough first round, I think, that she had there. We saw how well Tan did at Wimbledon. I think she got to the third or the fourth round. So actually, as it turned out, the third set tiebreaker, where she was also 4-love up, and probably Serena should have won that match. I remember a drive volley that she hit into the tram lines at a crucial moment. She also, I think, was serving for the match. So there are flashes there. I don't think there's enough flashes from Serena now that'll carry her to a slam final, as in the US Open final, because probably be her last. But there are flashes, and that may be enough to get her as far as the second week. And I'd love to see it. Anyway, let's talk about the women in general. You mentioned Bencic there, by the way, who I think is a danger at Cincinnati, and I wouldn't be surprised if she went all the way to the final. Are there any other players that you're really looking out for and think will go far?
I think, John, if you can just take me through what you feel about Swiatek coming into Cincy, because she's had these losses after a really long time. I think 3 or 4 losses now after that 37 match winning streak that she had, and that is going to play with her psyche. And she wouldn't feel as confident as she felt going into the French and going into Wimbledon. And I mean, she is going to the self doubt would that creep in?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they're all human. I know Swiatek hired a couple of years ago, I think just before she won the French Open in that the one that was held in October 2020. I know she hired a psychologist or a mental coach to help her on the mental side, and that certainly has carried her to some unbelievable victories and obviously 2 majors already. However, you win 37 odd matches in a row, and then in your next 6 matches, you lose 3. I think that's the record that she has currently. In her last 6 matches, she's lost 3 times, including one in Poland recently that you also highlighted. She obviously also lost in Toronto recently, and the other one would have, of course, been at Wimbledon. So the form has dramatically changed. However, it's still the world number 1 and the world number. I think in the race, she's got about double the next person's number of points. So I'm not pressing the panic button yet. A little bit like with Alcaraz in a way. Alcaraz is obviously a bit behind Swiatek in his progress, but I'm not pushing the panic button. I think once you start having 6 to 12 months of dodgy form, or even worse, somebody like Muguruza, for example, that's somebody to really be worried about. And also, funny enough, I was going through the draw this morning, and there was a name that I'd pretty much forgotten about, just suddenly jumps out at me, and it's Sofia Kenin. I don't remember the last time I saw her play. She's got a wild card here, but what a tough first round for her. I've actually got Shelby Rogers to win that. Again, it's Shelby Rogers as a player that seems to excel at this time of the year. I remember her beating Ash Barty in a really good match at the US Open last year, and I see Shelby Rogers going pretty far in this tournament. Coming back, though, to Swiatek, no time to press the panic button. I do have her getting to where I expect a blockbuster match with her and Coco Gauff. I've already said I think Gauff is going to win this tournament. But again, probably when it comes to the US Open, let's just say that Gauff beats Swiatek in 3 sets and goes on to lift this tournament. I would the conservative in me would probably still have Swiatek winning the US Open, but partly because I don't know. And I think in a world where we don't know, Swiatek is the one to go to, if you like, given how well she's played for most of this year.
You spoke of Gauff, and she just played Arina Sabalenka, and I want to bring this fact from the match. Gauff served 15 double faults, John. We've seen Sabalenka serve double faults, and that's been the story of the WTA. Why does Arina Sabalenka struggle so much with her serve? She had 18 double faults, and Coco Gauff was right there with 15. And that is a concern for me as someone who's also picked Coco Gauff as one of the hot favorites to go lift the US Open. Why is she struggling with her serve? Is this psychological? What do you make of this from Coco? And do you think she's, I mean, what do you feel for Coco Gauff at Cincy also?
So I think she's my tip, but honestly, you could have 10 or 15 players that would not be ridiculous to say that they could win Cincinnati. Am I worried about these double faults? Not really. Not if she's still winning matches in spite of it. I mean, Sabalenka is somebody who worries me far more regarding double faults. I think there is a big mental issue there. I think for some reason I feel better about Coco Gauff on that side. I think it's something that she will need to eliminate from her game if she's going to win a major. I think I couldn't see her repeating these levels of double faults and winning 7 matches, if you like. But she could win the US Open, as you highlighted earlier. And I think it's because you and I both believe that she will eventually stamp this out from her game, and she will do it often enough to. I mean, she got to the final at the French Open this year. Many people say that clay is probably her best surface, but her breakthrough tournament was Wimbledon when she beat Venus in 2019. I think she's pretty good on all surfaces, really, and I think she will win a major, whether that's this year or next. She will win a major, and it could be any one of those, the 4 majors. It really could be. So I'm not worried about her, but Sabalenka I am worried about because again, it's been almost a year of non-stop double faults from her, and you know it's psychological with her because you sort of see the way she reacts to the double faults. Whereas Coco's reaction is to take to Twitter and make a joke about it, which I saw her do last week. Any final thoughts on Cincinnati?
I personally feel this is like a mini US Open. You know, I think a lot of the psychological edge that this will give will play a major role going into the US Open. I mean, whoever gets to the semis, finals, that does help. The momentum is real, and I think we have to watch. But it'll be remembered. Everyone's watching this only to see how good Rafa is feeling. I think the biggest reason most of the people, the tennis world, would want to watch Cincy is to understand, obviously, Serena and Rafa, because Serena's playing her final. This every moment has to be cherished for we don't know. I mean, I believe this. She said it. She wants to evolve, like her own. You know, she wants. I don't think she will come back. So we want to cherish this for Rafa as well as for Serena. That's why this tournament will be remembered.
One final thing for me on Rafa, I would say, is I would think he would like to have at least a couple of matches. You know, if he does get to the quarterfinals and loses to Felix, for example, I think he would feel, okay, I've got 2 or 3 matches under my belt. That's what I need. You know, he's had such a stop-start year, such a strange thing to say about somebody who's won 2 of the 3 majors, but he has had a stop-start year with injuries this year, as he so often does. And he is someone that we know tends to prefer to have a few matches under his belt before going into a major. I think in Australia in particular, that 250 tournament that he played was vital to get him. I remember Owen from Popcorn telling me last week to get him used to the surroundings on Rod Laver, you know, because it was actually played in Melbourne, that tournament, as opposed to other parts of Australia, but also to get the matches under his belt. His performances weren't amazing, but he did enough to win that tournament. And I think it was huge, and it gave him some momentum. It gave him the minutes on the court he needed. If he has 3 matches here, you know, as you said, if he's 100% healthy, you know, he could easily go on and win this tournament. But I also wouldn't be, again, with Rafa, I wouldn't be too concerned if he had a, you know, but he does, if he went out to, I mean, I don't think it's likely, but if he was to go out to Borna Coric in his first match, for example, or the qualifier who Coric is playing, that would be a big concern, because I think he needs the minutes on the court as much as possible before the tournament. Another thing, though, regarding what you said about the women's as well, and being a good indicator as to what's going to happen in New York, it's also very useful that they've got a week off between. So many times I see players. I remember Dan Evans in Australia, although it was a 250, getting to the final at a 250, I think he may even have won it, and then just blowing up in the first round in Australia. I saw the same thing with Kokkinakis. I saw so many times in recent years, I see players playing on the Sunday, the day before a major. Now, whether that's a 250 or a Masters 1000, you're still playing, and you've still played just 4 or 5 consecutive matches. So I think it's really useful that you've got a week between Cincinnati and the US Open. So, yeah. Any final thoughts on anything we've discussed?
I think we've not discussed a big name, John Novak Djokovic. Is he playing the U.S. Open? Do you have some inside news?
I don't have anything inside. I've seen obviously people getting excited with certain tweaks in the rules and stuff like this in terms of entering the US. I don't have Joe Biden on speed dial or anyone like Fauci or anyone in the US. So I can't give you any inside information. All I will say is if there is some hope for Djokovic and his fans, it is that some of the vibes coming out from Djokovic regarding his social media posts do seem to say there is a chance still, but we've got 2 weeks, and then I do think Djokovic is a bit different to Nadal in that he can hit the ground running immediately. But even if he did get a reprieve and somehow managed to enter the US with any kind of exemption, or if they were to change the rules, the problem is the clock is ticking. And the other thing is, even if they do change the rules, normally, at least in my experience of COVID over the last 2 years, and things are changing all the time with this virus, but what tends to happen is when governments and organizations, they normally give a date a few weeks in advance. It's not like, okay, tomorrow, this is what's happening. What normally happens, so this will be a negative for Djokovic and his fans, normally they say, okay, in 3 weeks, this is going to happen. And so 3 weeks would be too late for him. So if you said to me, Djokovic is going to win the US Open, if we're going to be here in 4 or 5 weeks from now, and Djokovic is holding that trophy aloft, I would be surprised for a variety of reasons. And I would be fascinated to know how he got into the country, if he found a loophole. I just hope we don't go through a load of stuff like we had with Australia. And I don't think we will. But I just hope we don't go through that. It's no good for anyone. It's no good for Djokovic. It's no good for his fans. And it's no good for tennis as a whole. What are your thoughts? Do you think he's going to be playing?
I mean, like you said, I've been reading, like the last 2 days, I've been reading, there are some tweaks that they are speaking of. And I mean, all the Novak Djokovic fans are going crazy about it. And I've been trying to make sense of it. But I mean, till you have like something concrete that's still not there, I don't know. I mean, like, I really don't know if he'll make it. And like you said, if you have to make such a big announcement, it has to be, there has like 3 weeks in advance is what they will need to. I mean, they're just not going to say it today and tomorrow onwards it's going to get implemented. So yeah, I mean, I just don't want tennis to suffer, because what happened at Australia was a disaster for tennis in general. I mean, you call your best player in the world to Australia, then deport him. That is not showing. I mean, it showed everyone in poor light. So I don't want that to happen here. That's all.
Right. Thank you very much for coming on today, Saarthak. I think we've had a great chat about Cincinnati, both the men's and the women's, about Rafael Nadal, Serena Williams, Emma Raducanu, and a variety of other things. Saarthak, where can we find you on social media?
Well, you can find me on Twitter as @Saarthak tweets, and on Instagram as @Saarthak.official. But I had a really fun chat with you, John, and I look forward to more. I mean, with your insights, with the detail with which you analyze the sport, how many of, I mean, like you've mentioned through the interview, you've met Kyrgios, you've chatted with them to understand the psyche of these men. Being up close and personal with them, that's something that really fascinates me, and I think there was so much for me to learn too on this chat with you.
I'm going to New York as well, albeit I don't think I'm going in a press capacity. I would love to have a press pass like I had at Wimbledon, but sadly, a bit like Djokovic, I think I have applied, but I think the clock is ticking on that one, similar to Djokovic. So I don't think that, but I will be going in a fan capacity. I'll be there pretty much through the whole of the second week. And I'm super excited. I'm excited to see.
I think, John, you as a fan are choosing the best slam of the year because I feel this is the most open slam in terms of the results. We've seen over the years, the US Open can bring out any winner. Like we saw Emma Raducanu out of nowhere. And we've seen like Cilic has lifted Cilic. We've seen Del Potro. So, you can, like we did all of this talk. But tomorrow, or like in 3 weeks from today, we can have anyone lift that title. That's the beauty of the US Open.
It's the one major, of course, where none of the big three on the men's side have truly dominated. I think Federer has the
Exactly.
most with 5, for example. Whereas obviously you've got Wimbledon with 8 and 9. I think it is something like that Djokovic and
Yes.
Federer have, and
Right.
obviously 9 Australian Opens for Djokovic and the unbelievable 14 Roland Garros for Nadal. So it's the one, but it is the one where they haven't quite stamped their authority as much
True.
as others for bizarre reasons, if you like. Sometimes injuries, sometimes line judges getting hit by tennis balls and then getting kicked out of the tournament, as Djokovic had. So we've had so many twists and turns at this tournament, and I expect to see and hear many more in the coming weeks. Thank you very much, Saarthak, for coming on board, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Surely, without a doubt.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.